your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Reverend Dr. D. Richard Dugan, and we have a very interesting program coming your way. I just had the great pleasure of interviewing a gentleman who I actually went to work for a very brief period of time, doing some voice work for a book entitled The Quran. Only in this case, my guest was David Williamson, and he produced this wonderful dramatization of the Quran called The Audio Quran. Well, we're going to continue on in that kind of theme, if you will, because we've got a lot of misunderstanding going on out there. We're going to get some clarity and clarification. No. We're not going to focus on specifically the Islamic faith. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is getting some information from people who have been in the trenches, if you will, on the other side of the globe. We have with us an attorney, but he's a doctor as well, more along the lines of a PhD per se. A lawyer in California, as well as a former lawyer in France. His name is Frank Romamo, and he has had a really interesting experience that I thought would be important for all of us to take a look at and listen to. Again, the whole concept of this program is to broaden our perspectives. It is to take a look from as many points of view on that circle as I've talked about many times to better understand what's going on. Frank Romano, I want to thank you, first of all, thank you for joining us. I take it you are coming to us all the way from France, right?
Yes, I'm in Paris right now, where my main residence is in Paris. My youngest daughter's here, and I have children living in California. So I spent half my life on the West Coast in California, born in Oregon, and the other half in France.
Well, thank you for being with us. The story that you've shared with me, and of course, we've had a really extraordinary conversation using another application called WhatsApp, and I never really thought about putting that on my phone, but I have a gentleman who I do this podcast work for, and he sends me all the videos and the pictures and everything, so I have to have that, and that's how, in one sense, how we came. You sent me an email, and then we connected there, and had some extraordinary conversation not long ago about a wide variety of subjects. But the one in particular that I want to talk to you about, or have you share with our listeners about, has been going on for some time. It's been going on since this conflict that erupted in October of, what was it, 24, 23? I can't remember how long ago it was now. But it does seem...
October 7th, 2022, actually.
22. Of course, by the same token, the conflict in the Middle East has been going on for thousands of years. It's almost as though the combatants don't want to resolve the problem because they're just used to the fighting. But the rest of us on the outside are sitting here going, come on, let's sit down, put your big boy pants on, your big girl pants on. Let's work this out. Talk to us about how you became involved in what happened back in 2022, October 7, in regards to the Palestinian conflict with Israel, Israel's conflict with the Palestinians, and where you are today.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I long before actually October 7th, 2022, I've been going back and forth from Paris into Palestine and Israel and back and forth working on interfaith groups, and I'm working on conferences and demonstrations to try to work out or pressure type of a solution between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So my original motivation was when I was studying in Paris years ago, philosophy, and was disillusioned with life here because I was raised in Northern California, basically on farms, and I was doing a senior year abroad, but I did want to do international law, so I realized I have to get off the farm into cities. So I went to UC Davis and then transferred over to Paris to learn French and also think about how I'm going to integrate into the school system, go to law school and become a lawyer here, and I want to be an international lawyer. And so I had this dream, that long time, it was way back actually in 1978 when I was studying first, and the dream said something like, you're depressed or something like, go to Palestine, go to Israel and do something about the conflict. And even in 1978, this conflict has been going on actually hot and heavy since 1948. But anyway, here I am in 1978, and I left. It was a strong dream. So it was like I thought, this is kind of like an omen. And how am I going to find out if that's what I'm supposed to be doing if I don't give it a try? So I literally left the University of Paris, Sorbonne, and I left my job. I was a waiter and my lodging, and took a train. I didn't have the money to take a plane. It would have been much easier to take a plane from Paris to Tel Aviv and then go from there, a 3 or 4 hour plane trip. But I didn't have that money, so I had to take a train down to, the idea was that take a train down through France and Spain, then getting across the Mediterranean and going across northern Africa and getting eventually across the Sinai into Palestine and Israel. But that didn't happen. I mean, I got to Casablanca and I walked into a mosque to learn about Islam. And realized I've got to learn about Islam before I get to the Middle East, because I knew enough about Judaism and Christianity. I want to do interfaith work, so I thought a lot of the problems come from religion, but not all of them. It's not just a religious conflict. It's a lot more than that. And I walked into the wrong mosque. It was a Salafi group, very fanatic, and they were very kindly at first and taught me the prayers, but then I was actually prisoner inside this mosque. I could not leave the mosque, and I told them clearly that I'm on my way across North Africa. As you know, Morocco's in the southwestern corner of North Africa, and I'm going across. I want to go to Tunisia, Egypt, Algeria, and Egypt, Libya, Egypt, and finally into the Sinai. And the imam said, "No, I want you to stay here. You'll be our guest." I said, "How can you say I'm a guest? I'm your prisoner right now." Anyway, make a long story short, I was told later this was a Salafi group. It wasn't even a Moroccan group that is planted in Casablanca to recruit and to convert Moroccan Muslims into a more fanatic version. It actually was a group, maybe a part of the Muslim Brotherhood out of Egypt. It could have been part of Al-Qaeda or some very fanatic Muslim group. In any case, I had to escape. So I escaped, returned to Paris. I wasn't able to continue my voyage. I had lost a lot of weight. I'd done Ramadan with the group in Casablanca. So the best I could do was get back to Paris. Then I returned to the States, became a lawyer. This time I returned again to France, and I became a lawyer also in France. And I met some Israeli scholars at the university, and I was also hired to teach courses at the University of Paris, law courses and literature, and they told me about all this interface stuff going on in the Middle East and stuff. I was, all these peace projects going on, and I thought to myself, well, maybe I should try getting over there again. This time I took a plane. Now I've been to North Africa, been there, done that. This I take a plane from Paris to Tel Aviv, which I did. And from 2005 on, I'd been working, going back and forth, again doing conferences, some protest marches against the occupation of Israel of Palestine, because I realized that a big problem there with this occupation, what was happening in the West Bank, not to mention what was happening in Gaza. And then I was, to really fast forward, in 2019, I was jailed because I speak Arabic. I was working with Bedouins, living with the Bedouins in east of Jerusalem, when a Israeli bulldozer came to destroy the Bedouin village. And since I didn't have arms, I didn't have weapons to defend the Bedouin village, I only had my body. As I went in front of the bulldozer, unfortunately, the bulldozer didn't run over me. It stopped and left. But then I was taken by Israeli police to prison and eventually deported in 2019. So then 2019, I can't, from that point on, I can't go back to Israel and Palestine. I've got a ban. I'm banned from going back. So I became a lawyer for the Palestinian people before the International Criminal Court and filed a claim. I was able to successfully do that, and we won jurisdiction. And we still have, with other lawyers, not just by myself, we just still have claims for war crimes against Netanyahu and others, even American presidents like Trump and Obama, for war crimes that's pending. But what happened is, you probably heard, after 7 October, the International Criminal Court did issue arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant and other people. So that was a success, because we've been requesting arrest warrants for many years against Israeli agents and their accomplices, like American presidents, in this battle, and especially the massacre of Gazans in Gaza. So to fast forward then, after that, I said, but I can't go back to Palestine. How can I do that? How can I get back into Palestine? And I saw an ad about the flotilla, the Freedom Flotilla coalition, and they were asking for people interested in trying to get into Gaza by boat, carrying food, water, medication. So it was in Istanbul. So I went to Istanbul from Paris to join up. We were blocked from going, bureaucratic warfare, without going into detail. Then I returned to Paris after a couple months. I was called to Malta. A Freedom Flotilla boat, as you might recall, Richard, a while back, just 2.5 years ago, was bombed. So we were about ready to go on this boat, the activists, and go to Gaza with humanitarian aid, and we were bombed. So that didn't happen. So then I was called to Augusta to work on the Madeleine. The Madeleine was about ready to launch, and they took me off the Madeleine because they needed another journalist. They have to have at least 2 journalists. So I was very depressed. And then he said, look, go onto the Hondola, which is another boat they had preparing, a very famous boat. They'd gone all over Europe talking about Palestinian resistance and stuff. Said, well, the Hondola is about ready to go to Gaza now. So the Madeleine is leaving. You go on the Hondola. And I saw the Hondola boat in Sicily, and I bought it on behalf of the Freedom Flotilla. And I said to them, there's no way you can kick me off this ship, because I am the owner of this ship. And you want to sponsor us, fine, and help get people on here and activists and humanitarian aid. But I'm staying on this boat until we get to Gaza. And we almost got to Gaza. And then we were intercepted. That was the first interception, and another opportunity, if I can call it, to be in an Israeli prison. Then there's a first mission of the Global Sumud Flotilla. Now we're coming to now, pretty much. The first mission of Global Sumud Flotilla in 2025. I was on a boat. We almost got to Gaza. We were intercepted and taken into Ashdod, an Israeli port, into prison. And then we're coming to up, and what happened just over a month ago, actually, is I was on a second Global Sumud Flotilla boat, and we were intercepted near Crete. And but the Israeli, we were tortured and very, very violently treated, but we were released by the Israeli commandos to the Greek authorities a couple of days later. But we organized again, and we had more boats, and we set off again about a week later, and past Turkey, and we got intercepted again. And this time we were intercepted. We were taken to Ashdod, an Israeli port, and very violently treated. And unfortunately, on the boat taking us there, there was a girl allegedly raped. I mean, I was not a witness to it, but there were 15 people who were sexually abused, and there were broken ribs, broken noses. My biggest problem was when we got to the Ashdod Port, after this recent interception, the Israeli police put the handcuffs on my wrist so tight, and they didn't see that the bag that they give us with our things was in the handcuffs and making them even tighter. It was between the handcuff and my wrist was also the bag that they didn't see. So it was so tight that about after an hour, my hands were swollen like balloons, and so I couldn't hold back. I didn't want to say anything because I felt if I had said something, because we were bowing down and being hit and mistreated, I figured if I'd said something, that they would take it out on me and start hitting me and kicking me. All the people around me, they'd do the same until I couldn't stand it. So I started panting, and then one of my guy that was posting, next to me, on his hand was his forehead was also on the ground, and he was kneeling as I was in this awful position. Said, "You better say something." So I yelled out, "Medic!" And finally, the Israeli soldiers came, and it's been about an hour and a half of this excruciating pain. Cut the handcuffs off and put on looser fitting ones. But then this was the beginning. And then we were taken into cells, and there were cells that didn't have bathrooms in them and didn't have water, and they were depriving us of that for overnight. And then we were finally deported to Turkey. So this was just what recently happened. And again, what motivated Richard to be a part of the flotilla way back in the Freedom Flotilla, which is a different group than the Global Sumud Flotilla, even though they both endeavor to bring humanitarian aid to Gaza and have tried, and have all their boats have been intercepted up until now. It was a way for me to get back into Palestine and Israel without going through checkpoints or the Israeli airport where they would send me back home. It was a way for me to say, hey, may I have an opportunity to go see my friends in Palestine, to make a difference, to bring humanitarian aid, especially to the Gazan Palestinians, that's subject to the full-blown genocide. Many of them are dying of their starvation, and they don't have enough water and medication. And we're bringing all that to try to make a difference, was why I jumped on the opportunity for the Freedom Flotilla and the Global Sumud Flotilla to go to Gaza by boat.
Wow. That's quite a story. And the long and the short of it is, were you able to accomplish anything in this whole process in terms of helping people in Gaza in particular? Because obviously that was where you were headed to get humanitarian aid there. Did it ever arrive? Did it ever get to the people that needed it?
Well, absolutely no. All our boats, we had almost 100 boats this time. The first mission, we had about 44 boats. And before that, the Handel I talked about was just one boat. All those boats were confiscated along with tons and tons of humanitarian aid. But Richard, what I need to focus on, one of our main objectives, if not the main objective, was achieved. And that is when we left last time, and that last time we left in April, from Barcelona. It was like April 15th. It was supposed to be earlier than that, but we had delays. And so for April 15th, 16th, we left, headed to Gaza. We went through Italy and then Turkey. We got intercepted that first time, then intercepted the second time. There was no press. And from the first mission in 2025, when we were intercepted, we had able to refocus the world's attention back to the struggle of the Palestinian people. It's not about us, the activists. To me, we're just conduits through us showcasing the suffering of the Palestinian people. And after the first mission, and during the first mission, there was a lot of attention. And so a lot of people, I'm getting to the main achievement of this last Global Sumud Flotilla was to refocus a lot of attention back to the Gazan struggle, because most people are more focused on the Iranian conflict and so forth, to know that there's a ceasefire in Gaza that's not effective at all, that the Israelis continue to massacre Gazans, to deprive them of food, water, and medication all throughout, all since the last mission. So what we were able to do was refocus a lot. Millions of people finally were to refocus attention to the Palestinian struggle, and also and the fact that the genocide is still ongoing. And what we've done here, Richard, specifically, is there's a lot of people, hundreds, thousands of people that were on the fence about it, that were still in the discussion phase, in the thinking phase. What we were able to do, which is a major success, the flotilla and other movements at the same time, a lot of strikes that were going on at the same time in Italy and other places, and a lot of demonstrations. We were able to convince a lot of people to move from simply discussing about the difficult situation in Palestine and their desire to do something, and then move into direct action. I'm not just saying direct action, Richard, is just about trying to get to Gaza in the boats and then bringing a lot of attention to the Palestinian struggle. I'm thinking also of engaging in the land convoy that was also blocked, and then or engaging in demonstrations, or engaging in a full-blown boycott effort. Because what is very strange, and I'll just for another minute here, is I'm French American, and the French President Macron not long ago recognized the state of Palestine, made a big deal out of it. Yes, we recognize the state of Palestine. We recognize their right to have their state and so forth. But at the same time, he continued approving the sending of weapons to Israel to continue engaging in the genocide, the massacre of Palestinians. So it's very hypocritical gestures, as well as many other European countries doing the same thing. They are recognizing the existence of Palestine, but it's very meaningless, really, if they don't start boycotting their sending of weapons to permit, to enable the massacre going on, because Israelis are using European weapons and American weapons to kill Palestinians and to control Palestine and control the gates so that humanitarian aid doesn't come in. So this hypocrisy of recognizing Palestine, and I'm saying in particular by the French government, at the same time sending weapons to kill Palestinians, is really meaningless political gestures. And finally, Richard, the Minister of International Affairs in France has decided to sponsor a lawsuit against the Israeli actions, Israeli agents for this last interception. You've probably heard in the press, Richard, all the violence, in not just French citizens all over the world, but in particular French citizens, because French citizens, including myself, were tortured, were mistreated, even though we're non-violent agents just bringing in humanitarian aid, completely legal under international law. So I was just interrogated recently by agents of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Quai d'Orsay, France, to prepare this lawsuit. And I told the person, this is great, I know it's a political gesture by the French government to do something because of your own citizens were their rights were violated, mistreated, and tortured. Even though what we were doing, bringing humanitarian aid and breaking this illegal blockade, was clearly legal under international law. What you're doing is it's just a gesture, because what really would help would you stop engaging in commercial activity with Israel. I think there are no arms finally being sold, being imported from France to Israel. I think that has been, for other grounds, I think that started a way back, so I think that has stopped. But still, France has engaged in many commercial activities with Israel. The full boycott is what we're asking for all commercial affairs with Israel. Neither importing nor exporting goods into Israel is what we're asking the European and the world governments to do. And if they don't, they are an accomplice to a genocidal government.
It seems really bizarre in my observation that we're still playing these games in the 21st century. When Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, The first thing that went through my mind was, and I even verbalized this, I says, I wish I had the wherewithal. I could get a plane ticket to Moscow. I'd go to Moscow. I'd go into the Kremlin. I'd go into the room where he is. I'd grab him by the ear and say, your mother's ashamed of you. This is not the way we play in the 21st century. That's naive. I understand that. Idealistic. I understand that too. But it's like, how much longer are we going to play these games that cost the lives? And I'll tell you, I view it from the standpoint of the loss, not just of life, but the loss of potential. What could that person have contributed to our society and civilization, whatever country they're from, whatever belief system or political system they're with, that could make a difference and change things for the better for all of us, which is part of what this program is about. We're talking with barrister Frank Romano, and we're going to continue that as we continue talking here on Tell Me Your Story. Reverend Dr. D, along with barrister Frank Romano, coming to us all the way from Paris, France. He's a California attorney, studied in the Sorbonne there in Paris, and has been involved in this situation. A couple of questions I want to ask you. First of all, would you consider yourself, because I don't know what languages you speak, are you like trilingual? Because you said that you learned the language over there, but you also have lived in Paris. Do you speak French and Arabic and obviously English? Any other languages that you, aside from legalese?
And you're right, that is a language, whether it be in France or the U.S. Actually, people don't understand this, but when I left to do a senior year abroad from UC Davis, I wanted to get into international law and maybe diplomacy, and I was very bad at languages. I figured the only way to learn French is to be surrounded by it. And so I did a senior year abroad, and I stayed in France, and then I returned to the States, and then returned after that to do my master's and doctorate. And as a practicing lawyer, you better believe I speak fluent French, because I became a French litigator. So here I'm a courtroom lawyer. I still had an accent, but I used my skills and my accent to win the cases as much as I could, because a lot of the gestures you use and a lot of the techniques you use as a California lawyer, you use in other courts. It's a different system. Mm-hmm. But I learned to communicate very well, and finally learned the language. But as a litigator, people are always asking me, including my students. I became a tenured professor at the same time. You could do both. I was teaching for 1 or 2 days a week, and I was practicing law for the rest of the time. And my first year law students, the first week, sooner or later, the question would arise, and I'd ask them, I'd say, is anyone interested here, because they're all law students, right, interested here in becoming litigators and becoming trial lawyers? And most law students, whether they be in the United States or in France, don't want to do that. It's very intense. It's true. It's 24/7 a lot. It's much less intense if you are in-house counsel or you work in a law firm, but not as a trial lawyer. And about 5% of hands were raised and said, okay, now I'm a trial lawyer. I was initially a trial lawyer in California, and I became one in France, labor law and so forth, and I moved into international law. Where do you think I got the best training to become a trial lawyer? And they raise their hand at me and say, well, here in law school, we have mock trial. So it must be you took courses in mock trial. Maybe you did an internship in a law firm. I said, no, none of those were the best ways that I could get trained as a trial lawyer. It's actually, before I became a lawyer, I was a professional actor. And I had my first experience in France acting classic plays like Bourgeois Gentilhomme by Molière, really classic. And those classic plays, the type of training you get is very intense. There's lots of dialogue, lots of gestures. And I told them, look, here at University of Paris, it was Nanterre where I was teaching, which is in the west of Paris. There's a famous theater called Nanterre Something Theater. This summer, when you're on vacation, join the theater group, become an actor there, and you'll find that that's the best training for trial lawyers. And so the students would have I could see their eyes were wide in disbelief, actually, but I don't know if they even believed me or even took up on my advice. Anyway, to make a long story short, I started, really helped me as a trial lawyer in France and the U.S. was my acting trainer. And since I've retired as a trial lawyer, and other than I still represent the Palestinian people before the International Court, Criminal Court, as I said before, that's the only client I have, and I do that pro bono. I've returned to my original acting career, and I did about 2 years ago. I was lead actor in an off-Broadway play in New York. So I'm back to doing that, except now my activism work is really revved up with the flotillas that I have postponed all my acting jobs and all the offers and film offers. And there's been I'm not saying it's that many, but there's been a film offer and some theater acting offers that I've had to postpone everything, focusing on activism, because I think direct action again takes priority, and hopefully there will be a durable peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and then I can maybe get back to acting. But for now, I'm focused on direct action now.
Well, we're talking with a barrister, actor, and activist, among other things, and his name is Frank Romamo here on Tell Me Your Story. I find your story very interesting and intriguing, and it raises a whole bunch of other questions. The first of which is, how is it even possible? And of course, I'm keeping it more current, that a group of alleged, because I don't know this for a fact, Palestinians, members of supposedly alleged to be of Hamas, could enter Israel on October the 7th of 22 and do what they did, taking hostages or kidnapping people, etc., and killing many people too, without the Israeli government or the military knowing that this was going to happen, number one. But number two, supposedly they have this, what do they call it? The Iron Shield or Dome or something like that.
Iron Dome. Yep.
And it's like, and I realize these people came in on ground. They didn't come in through the air. But I'm just sitting here thinking, how is this even possible that this could have even happened, on top of the fact that it took forever for anybody to get there to give any aid or assistance or repel this force? Has it been 100% confirmed that this was a group of, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong here, Palestinians connected with Hamas, and again, I don't know that much about that either, who entered Israel and did what they did? Has that all been confirmed 100%? And to me, it's just a continuation of the tit for tat that's been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Well, that's a very loaded question. I wouldn't call myself really an expert on this,
Okay.
but I speak Arabic, and I have spoken to people connected with Hamas. Just happened to be, talking to people in Gaza, and all of a sudden there's someone that showed up. This is my take on this, Richard. What really compromised Israeli security was hubris. For a long time, it seemed like Hamas was calming down, and there were very few attacks, and so Israeli soldiers started to withdraw from the borders, and they put camera devices, pretty much to control the borders. They didn't really feel that there was a great threat as much as in the past. I think they were really overconfident, and Hamas was cleverly organizing this attack all the time, and even sending out vibes that through the radio lines. This is what I heard anyway. That Israeli agents would intercept, saying, we're just going to maintain what we've got here. We're giving up completely on any type of military action. And the Israeli agents bought it. I think partially, not all of them. I think they pretty well were very overconfident that Hamas are not going to attack them at the time. And Hamas also organized this attack when it was a holiday of some type. I know there was a concert right next to the border
Yeah.
where people showed up and the music and maybe it was an Israeli religious holiday, so the people were on vacation and stuff. And so that, and also I believe the Palestinians were able to send over either devices. Somehow they were able to neutralize a lot of the cameras. So they were able to do it very quickly. Somehow they did it. I'm not sure if they had their own drones to do it, but there were cameras that were, a lot of them were neutralized, so they didn't. The Israeli agents didn't know what was going on. They were black, and they're black. There was a blackout. And you said the Hamas came by land, but they also were, I believe, they were also the Hamas, and it was pretty well Hamas was behind this, basically behind this attack, and I believe that has been confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not just Hamas there, but let's just say Hamas was generally monitoring and conducting this attack. I believe there are also Hamas agents that came over via kites, gliders. I believe the wind was perfect for them to glide over, and they were using close to the shore type of gliders.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there were gliders coming over. They were able to break through pretty easily. I think they were able to do a lot of subterfuge and break through the gates. And since there was so much overconfidence, there weren't many Israeli soldiers in the area, which I think is what happened. So the Hamas really prepared for this. And if you look at their point of view, they've been for years in this open air type prison and were deprived of, food. I mean, Omert, former Israeli prime minister, along with generals, were saying, we're going to keep the Gazans on a very strict diet. In other words, just above starvation. But I think it was even more of a diet. And the Gazan Palestinians were starving. And they even deprived babies of baby diapers and chocolate. A lot of this was this pressure on the Gazan public, not just to have the right food to survive, but other foods and other facilities or things that women could use, for their own hygiene and things like that. They were deprived of. So it was really demoralizing how they've been treated for all these years and deprived of basics. And the 97% of their water is contaminated, so they're trying to drink non-contaminated water, trying to get water and medical supplies. A lot of the hospitals and doctors have been targeted. Anyway, make a long story short, the Hamas, is supposed to be representing the Palestinian people, said, well, we've got to try something desperate here because it's getting worse and worse. Our people are dying. I mean, the garbage is piling up. Rodents are taking over. There's diseases everywhere. And Israel's not allowing us to have our own state. They're not allowing us the basics. They're destroying our universities, our hospitals, our doctors, and our journalists. So they don't want the truth out. So this was a desperate act, really. And I think they simply said, we've got to try something. Otherwise, we're going to be crushed into the earth if we keep this going. So I think it was a real, I wouldn't say a necessity, but in their minds, it's like it's better perhaps to fight to survive other than die as slaves, because we are like submissive slaves, totally surrounded and picked off one by one, often by Israeli snipers, and our houses are targeted, not just houses with Hamas in them. The civilians have been murdered over there, as well as doctors and so forth. So I think I'm not trying to justify, I'm trying to share an understanding of their mindset. Mm-hmm. All of these things, and so once they broke through the gates to get into Israel, I believe there were a lot of non-Hamas people that are also able to get through the gates. I don't think they were all Hamas doing, because normally Hamas has a very strict honor code, not just a Muslim. I mean, strict. I mean, not to kill, not to rape. And so it's surprising when you see allegedly Hamas soldiers that are very Islamic committing these atrocities. But it's possible that happened. But I'm thinking a lot of non-Hamas and maybe not so religious were jumping through the gates, and they were trying to seek revenge. I mean, they've been pent up in this Gaza area and many of their family have been killed, and their kids have been killed or starved and so forth. And they were just so full of hate. They committed these awful atrocities. Again, these atrocities against Israelis after October 7th are not justified. Just like the Israeli bombing of civilian buildings that are happening even today, it's not justified. You know, that when your two countries are at war, you target military targets if you're really at war, but not civilians, not children, not doctors, not hospitals, where people, and especially have been proven that a lot of these places were not connected to Hamas at all.
Right.
And vice versa. Hamas sending rockets over at random and killing Israelis, and obviously not targeting a lot of times military targets. That's not justified either. But the pressure going in their minds is understandable. What was in their minds, Hamas, doing this and responding to the destruction in Gaza. But and the Israelis after October 7th, how they crushed the Gazans is understandable, because they were, they use a lot of propaganda also saying, look, at the Hamas is going to start taking over. They're full of hate. They're animals. Let's just go and kill them. So there was a lot of propaganda Israeli trying to justify the atrocities. We can understand their mindset trying to take revenge for what happened October 7th, but it's not justified. It's understandable, this tension and this hate on both sides. None of these killings, like you say, it was in a lot of these solutions. They could bring a durable peace if they really wanted to, but a lot of people on both sides, whether it be in the Gazan side, the Israeli side, don't want peace, and they want to continue the conflict. They want to continue killing, and for whatever reasons that we could get into, and this becomes a vicious cycle of hate and killing that's got to stop, and hopefully with the pressure on both sides. In particular, now that the Israelis are pretty much in charge of Gaza now, and a lot of atrocities still committed, that we can work with both sides and work with the United States and the allies of Israel to pull back from the support, because the far-right Israeli government, led by Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, pretty well, Netanyahu's in charge, but he's a lot of times having to follow them, far-right, pro-religious, and very much in wanting the Israeli Jews take over the entire area. That's what Ben-Gvir and Smotrich aren't even hiding the world on. And they've adopted a lot of legislation in Israel privileging Jews over non-Jews. So it's kind of justify that. I think this government's gone haywire. It's gone way to the right, vicious, Jews-only type of situation, and has succeeded in their propaganda to convince the Israeli people that they're the only government that will protect them. Otherwise, it will be a new Holocaust, which it's clearly dubious that anywhere near that risk. But the Israeli government has succeeded in doing this, and so it's become it really has really stilted the Israeli public opinion against Palestinians, and the Palestinians also have brainwashed their own people against Israelis. It's a vicious cycle that we've got to work on, Richard, somehow, pressuring governments not to aid Israel, to pressure them, like South Africa was pressured with the boycotts to stop prejudice and discrimination and atrocities against Africans in South Africa through the boycott movement. I think we need to keep working on that and working on efforts to force Israel. I think they'll have to be forced at this point, because they're so propagandized into wanting to take the initiative and erasing Palestinians from the globe, that we have to right the plane here. And work on both sides, get back into humanitarian interests, because I think a lot of times the military-industrial complex has taken over, and big businesses are making money off these conflicts. That's another part of the conflict, Richard, that we could address, and bring together humanitarian principles and love and care back into the forefront. And hopefully we can do that, Richard, and we can somehow find a durable peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
That would be nice. And of course, the phrase, or the saying, as it were, is, if we refuse to learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And that's what has been happening in that part of the world for a very long, long time. Question for you in regards to Israel. I don't want to paint a broad brush stroke here, but it may be accurate that those Israelis who live in Israel are Jewish. And the observation has been made, I've heard this, that the Jews have completely forgotten what their people went through 70 years ago. They have completely forgotten the Holocaust. Not that it didn't happen. It's as if they are now doing to the Palestinians what the Germans did to them and others. That's an observation that I heard not long ago. What are your thoughts in that regard?
Well, I think it's really complicated because I spent a lot of time going back and forth from Paris, not just into Palestine, to Israel,
Mm-hmm.
working with Israeli Jews, interfaith groups, Zionist groups, non-Zionist groups, and Palestinian groups. I mean, just to kind of add to what you said, there are a lot of Israelis that are not Jews, actually. About 20% of them actually are Palestinian backgrounds that are Israeli citizens, but not Jews. But I'll tell you, there's many theories behind it, because it's startling when you look at the news today. But I think if we take a step back and look at history and look at psychology, one of the things that's happened as a phenomenon is that many of the Israelis that survived the death camps in Germany thought, well, there's only one other place I can go, and I won't be discriminated as a Jew, and that is a place where we call a state of Israel. Because there's pogroms in Europe, there's pogroms in Russia, and sooner or later we saw what happened in the end of the 1800s with Herzl and the Dreyfus trials in France, where at the beginning of Zionism, actually, when Herzl appeared at the hearing of Dreyfus, who was a Jewish French soldier accused of betraying France, and because he was Jewish, a lot of people were chanting anti-Semitic chants in the streets. Herzl said, look, we've got to find a Jewish homeland, because sooner or later, no matter where we are going to be discriminated against simply because we are Jews. And there's some truth in that. And so I'm not fundamentally against the idea of the state of Israel. But what happened during the Holocaust, we in World War II, so to get to your question, Richard, more specifically, we saw what happened among the 6 million Jews and non-Jews that were exterminated. And then many of those Jews that survived the death camps felt, again, they had no other place to go. And they found themselves in Israel, or in the place that Israel was made under the mandate of 1948, the UN mandate. And then it wasn't a given, but the Israelis, Jews agreed to have their state in 1948. It was after the Balfour Declaration, 1917, and then it gave rise to a UN partition agreement that the Jews believed in, but not that agreed to, but not the Palestinians. And then they started their state. Now, the theory is, you look at what is happening to the Palestinians, the egregious atrocities. Where they go in, for instance, Shayatet 13, the commandos that intercepted us, the flotilla, were called into Al-Shifa hospital. And normally they are seamen, and they only focus on intercepting, like they intercepted us, the Global Sumud Flotilla, and they intercept the Freedom Flotilla boats. But they're such a vicious group of commandos that they were sent in to clean up Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza, because the Israeli soldiers were having a problem controlling it. And they did clean up that hospital. They massacred everyone. They even killed babies in incubators. And then you see these type of atrocities, Richard. And then you see an Israeli soldier going into a house, and there's a man who's raising his hand, giving himself up. And he is deaf and dumb. He cannot hear and he cannot speak. But he's raising his hands, has no arms, and they shoot him full of bullets, kill him, and then he leaves the house, and the other Israeli soldiers praise him as a hero. What's going on here? What is going on here? Well, one theory is this. It's analogous to, let's say, a man is abused by his father, whether physically or otherwise, and it's shown that unless that man gets therapy, he'll turn around and abuse his own kids. It becomes a vicious cycle. And this man who was abused is abusing his kids that are innocent of the origin of his own abuse, still doing it. It's like a vicious cycle. And the theory is that many of these Israeli Jews that were subject to the death camps are turning around and taking out their frustration, their hate on Palestinians that are innocent. Sort of like the same analogy of what happens in families. But it's far more complicated than that, because many Israeli Jews have gotten therapy, even those that have survived from the Holocaust, that have contested what their own government is doing to the Palestinians and the soldiers and the settlers in these atrocities. So you've got the other side of the coin, too, where these Holocaust victims have contested what their government's doing to the Palestinians, saying, hey, don't you remember what happened to us? You're turning around and doing the same thing to the Palestinians.
Right.
So, but there's a theory not to justify what's going on in the mindset of these Holocaust victims who transfer their hate and their insecurities to their children, who turn around and then abuse their children, maybe, or abuse the Palestinians. It becomes a vicious cycle. That's just one theory. But I think another theory that seems to really take a lot of precedence now is these children, just like Palestinian children, though the Israeli children are brainwashed so heavily to believe that every Palestinian is a potential terrorist, so therefore you can kill Palestinian babies because they're going to turn into terroristic to try to kill you. So therefore it's justified killing babies in incubators, as the Shiite 13 commandos did a couple of years ago in El Shifa Hospital. They're receiving very, very clever, very intense brainwashing. So when they get older, like a knee-jerk approach is Palestinians aren't even human. They deserve to die. They want to take our land. They want to turn around and kill us all. It's going to be another Holocaust, so we've got to kill them first. So this is all very simplistic, though, Richard.
Yeah.
But a lot of these theories are coming together. And it does not, again, justify what the Israelis are doing, what the Israeli government are doing, the settlers, and many of the far-right ministers believe in. And even the discrimination is amazing. The Jews have been so highly discriminated against in other countries, including Germany, and yet they have laws that are clearly discriminatory against non-Jews in Israel. Doesn't seem, these theories, it just helps us understand their mindset, but again, does not justify the discrimination, the treatment of Palestinians.
And also what you said earlier, too, that what the Palestinians have been doing doesn't justify. We can understand both sides. We can understand their positions. It still doesn't justify the killing and the maiming of human beings in that part of the world. The other thought that came to me was that maybe there is some part of both the Israeli and the Palestinian DNA that, for whatever reason, has been activated in that regard, or gets reactivated every so often. Because I remember back in the 70s, and now, of course, it wasn't the Palestinians and the Israelis, it was Israel and Egypt. And the thing that was so frustrating when this news finally came out was that we were providing arms to both sides. And it was to keep the Russians from supplying. And I'm thinking, and of course, Carter was in there trying to garner peace between the two. And of course, you have that wonderful picture between Menachem Begin and son Anwar Sadat shaking hands with Carter's hands on top as they agree to a peace settlement, which lasted a while until, of course, the assassination of Sadat, and obviously Menachem Begin passed as well. And, here we are again, only this time, instead of Egypt and Israel, it's the Palestinians. And I guess one of the things that I find interesting too, and that we have refused to do this. We have refused as a people, whether it be in America or other parts of the world, to look as objectively as possible at the respective histories of these, in particular, because that's what we're talking about here, these two peoples. I think about, for example, there are those who blame the Jews for killing Yeshua. The Jews did not kill Yeshua. They may have been complicit, but they didn't kill him. The Romans killed him. And that's just one side. I don't know the history of the Palestinians. I don't know where they come from over 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 years ago. And we here in this country, we got our own problems with what we refer to as the Native Americans, those of the various tribes, the Apache and the Sioux and the Cheyenne, et cetera, et cetera. I love George Carlin's take on that too, by the way. So I don't want to talk to them. I mean, I don't want to refer to them as Native Americans or Indians. No, I want to refer to them by their tribes, because none of us is native. I mean, you could use the term indigenous, but wherever it is that we were born, and I was born in the United States, so that makes me indigenous, right? You were too. You're indigenous to the United States, but you happen to live half the time in France. My brother, he's an American. He's a U.S. citizen, but he lives half his time in Vietnam with his wife and new baby. And then when he comes here, so he's indigenous. And it's like, okay, so we need to better define our terms in this regard. And I want to kind of do that by taking a different tack here. We're going to do that. We're talking with barrister, actor, activist Frank Romamo here on Tell Me Your Story. Reverend Dr. D and Frank Romamo, who has shared an awful lot. And I'll tell you what, Frank, here's going to be the hard turn. Here's the hard turn for us, okay? How do we take a look at everything that has been said here thus far that you have shared with us? And how do we put any kind of an optimistic, positive spin on any of it so that we can begin to see and show and share and express love and humanitarian principles in these kinds of situations, whether it be Israel and Palestine, whether it be Russia and Ukraine, or wherever else in the world, there are at least two factions. And I'll be honest with you, even here in the United States, from a political standpoint, at least we haven't picked up arms and we're shooting direct. We're not. There's no war, no civil war going on like there was 150 years ago. But there is the verbal exchange. And of course, I've often said, words have power. So, be careful what you say and take responsibility for what you say, because there's going to be someone there that's going to not be cotton into what you're saying and may pick up arms. All right. You can understand why they do it, not justifying it, but you can understand that they're ticked because they don't like what you're saying and they want you to shut the hell up. Let's talk a little bit about somehow, some way, turning this thing 180 degrees around as far as our conversation, because this program is about community. It's about fostering not only community, but also about talking about choices and knowledge of those choices. If we don't know what choices there are, there's no way for anybody to be informed about them. So what can I do? What can and you're already doing it. You get on these flotillas and you try to get humanitarian aid to the people who need it, regardless of who they are. You don't care about their politics, their religion, their economic status, the color of their skin. You care that they're hurting. What can we do? How can we do our part as human beings, one to another?
This is actually very appropriate at this point in our conversation, because after I returned from this last interception, and then I was on the kind of a torture ship, the Ktzi'ot 13, that commando group I told you are the ones who intercepted us, tortured us, and then we went to Ashdod Port, Israel, and then there was more torture in prison till we were finally released and deported a couple, 3 days later. I sat down and thought it over, and I thought, I really think that we need to not just focus on our own suffering, because there were programs after that where many of my activist comrades were complaining about the torture they subjected to, and they're going to file a claim before the International Criminal Court. And as I said, the French authorities, under the Minister of International Relations, Quai d'Orsay, is filing a complaint. And my idea, Richard, was take a step back and not point the fingers at any particular person, but have a little empathy here for both sides on where they're coming from, and then think, what's behind it all? What's really behind it all? It's not even Hamas. It's not the far right Israeli government. What's behind the world struggle now is a very clever, powerful group involved and linked to the military-industrial complex, big businesses that are profiting from these wars, that are manipulating all of us. And even, you can say, even Trump has been a bit manipulated by these big businesses, even though you think he's the manipulator. He's under the auspices of these big businesses, military-industrial complex, which has also formed our priorities in a very sly way, in the form of propaganda. So what I think that could really bring us all together is saying, let's understand this and have empathy that what has happened is there's a great deal of evil that's taken over, led by these big business money interests that's really manipulating the Israelis and the United States. It's not about the Jews or Israeli Jews. They're being manipulated severely by powers that want more power, that want land, that want to enhance their military prowess and sell arms, that are controlling the world. So when I made a statement, and directly after this interceptor, and after I was home for a while and calmed down and recouped, saying, I really feel that we have to recognize that part of what the Gazan Palestinians are doing, a lot of them are saying, well, we do want to free Palestine. We want to free ourselves from the genocide. But they're also saying that we see the same forces that are controlling us, that are making us suffer, are making the entire world suffer. We see that these are evil forces. And if we can all come together and fight the evil forces that want to divide us. We talked about that, Richard, that there are these divisional things that are happening that are enhancing our hate and our desire to fight. And behind it, a lot of it are money interest, power interest, money power nourished by greed. We can recognize this. And I think the Gazan Palestinians have really helped us in a way to say we can resist this, because they're not just interested. It's crazy. They've been subject to starvation. They don't have enough water and medication. They have lots of diseases there. Many people have been, many civilians have been targeted, but they're still interested in saying, but we think that this can be a model of resistance for the world, and all oppressed people can see our resistance as encouragement that they can also resist, such as those in the Amazon. The rainforest is being destroyed by many of the same businesses. In Colombia, we see this happening. We see in Chiapas this is happening. We see in other parts of the world that the big business interests are controlling and taking over. We see what's happening in the United States, taking over. And then at the end of my statement, I said, maybe we can replace these evil forces with love and humanitarian interest as a priority. And it sounds idealistic, I know, Richard, but this is what is needed. But we can only do this through empathy. If we empathize with each other's struggle, like I'm a father, I've lost my son in this war. You're a father, you lost your son. You're an Israeli father. I'm a Palestinian father. We've lost our mothers. We empathize with our struggling. Come on, man, we want the same things. And basically, we want peace. We want to live together. We want to recognize each other's values. We want to love each other, really, deep down, and respect each other. Where we come from different cultures and languages, we want to bring to the top humanitarian interests that seem to be shoved to the bottom now by these powers that be. I think with the empathy, and we can bring this whole thing together as a world movement to pull back on what's happening to us all. You look
Yeah.
at what's happening in the United States, we're looking at what's happening in South America, in the Middle East. Oil interest, military interests seem to take prevalence over everything. That this could be the catalyst, what's happening in Gaza, especially when the Gazan Palestinians, in spite of their suffering, have constantly been saying, we do want to liberate Palestine. We want to stop the genocide, but we want to also inspire the world to liberate itself from many of these same powers that we see eating up the world in a very, I think, a non-egoistic way of saying, we think there's a need for a world revolution, but what type of revolution? Not a violent revolution. We're empathizing with each other's struggle in the auspices of bringing together empathy and love and humanitarian interest into the forefront as something that we should all focus on, as opposed to simply, padding what we're doing with more money, with more power, with more greed, which seems to be taking over the world. And that is behind a lot of what's happening in Israel and the West Bank. And look at Trump set up this whole committee, basically saying that we're going to turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. What does that mean? Big five-star hotels and residential centers for rich people, without even addressing, what's going to happen to the Gazans? You're going to kick them out. You're going to continue killing them to get rid of them, so you can have this very valuable storefront that you and your nephew Kushner can profit from. So I think what we're seeing through Trump, the manifestations of this evil business ethic empire that's placing priority over land and power and money over the people. And I know it sounds idealistic too, Richard, because you've been saying, well, I think but we got to start with the ideals. But I think also finally respecting international law. I mean, the fact is that when you talked about Putin in the Ukraine, he did receive an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court that the U.S. approved of. But when it happened to be arrest warrants issued against Netanyahu and gallant American allies, the United States, through Trump, issues sanctions against the court. So it's very hypocritical. We need to learn that international law is there to develop some type of world equilibrium. That's just another aspect that we can talk about later. But getting back to empathy, I think that's what we really need to focus on. And I see that as real hope. If and when people look at the way I was treated, and I could turn around and be very negative and say, geez, we were treated like dogs. We were humiliated. We really were humiliated by the Israeli agency. But look, they are manipulated. These agents are manipulated. And especially if the Holocaust wasn't that long ago, they're so manipulated so powerfully to ignore what happened to them. That's strong manipulation. That if we can focus our priorities back on love and humanitarian interest, what we all need to do, then we got a chance.
Yeah. I am not taking sides in the conflict. I just want the conflict to stop. I just want it to stop. This is, like I said earlier, I says, this is not the way we play in the 21st century. We have come too far and we have lost too much over the centuries to continue to play this stupid game. And again, your point is withstanding about, follow the money. All right. That's how you know who's running the show here. Well, follow the money and then do what needs to be done to do what needs to be done to stop these things so that we can. And that's not to say that we won't have challenges in our lives. We will always, because this is the world in which we live. I mean, even if nature was the only thing that we had to deal with, we still have challenges with the storms and the earthquakes and the volcanoes and the tornadoes up the tornado alley here in the United States, which, by the way, I found out is a rather unique situation. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world like it does here this time of the year, which I find absolutely fascinating. Has nothing to do with climate change, and I'll toss climate change aside and say, in addition to these conflicts, we just need to clean up our home. That's all. We just need to clean up our home. We're talking with barrister, actor, activist Frank Romano, and we're talking about all of these different things, trying to put I don't want to say a positive light on it, but a spin that says, hey, there is something we can do. And I hope that you are taking this in. Again, we're not taking sides here. I'm not anyway. I'm not taking sides. I just want to see everybody thrive. It's time for us to thrive on this planet. It's a beautiful place. It really is. So I hope that you will take that in as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Frank Romano, my guest here on the program, very interesting and a provocative story that you've been sharing with us throughout this program. I appreciate everything that you have said. I don't discount any of it. At the same time, I also hope that our listeners won't discount any of it. And as I said before, this isn't about taking sides. That's what's got us into the problem that we're in. We've been taking sides. We're all human beings. We're human beings. Set aside the religious and the ethnic and the economic and political differences, educational, etc. We all have a right to be here. I was going to ask you, what is it about Palestine, and you could even pull Iran into this, that wants to literally, I believe it is literally, obliterate, wipe out from the face of the earth Israel and the Jews? What is their problem? Kind of like the Germans back in the 40s wanted to get rid of all of the Jews, the homosexuals, anybody that didn't conform. And I will take that to this point. It's like, so if we all thought the same, and if we all looked the same, and if we all acted the same, and everything was the same, would you really want to live in that kind of a world? I'm going to put the question to you just the same. If you know, what is it that these different groups hate so much about the Jews that their perspective is the Jews do not even deserve to exist on the planet? I'm that flabbergasts me.
Yeah, no, it is when you hear that. It is flabbergasting. And when I was in Tunisia, for instance, which is a fairly liberal Arab nation compared to others, a little bit after their revolution, after the Arab Spring movement that actually initiated there in Tunisia, I went into high schools and looked on the map of the Middle East. Guess what I saw when I looked in the Palestine-Israel area? I only saw Palestine. Israel wasn't even mentioned on the map.
Wow.
And so I'm thinking to myself, well, what's going on? Well, one approach is this, and it goes for both sides, is the interpretation of the Quran. And the Quran is interpreted in many different ways. There's some salat, and I can read Arabic, and I've practiced Islam with my Muslim friends, but I was raised Christian in any case. I see that it says in some salat that the Muslims has the right to kill non-Muslims engaged in holy war. But it's taken out of context by these groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, because it really, when you see there's another salat in the Quran that says Muslims to engage in any type of violence at all needs to be under the auspices of self-defense. So what happens is they take one of the salats out of context, allowing Muslims to kill, get rid of non-Muslims because they don't believe in Islam, they're going to hell anyway, and not putting it together with other salats and say, but if your home is being attacked, your families are being destroyed, or your country is being destroyed, you have the right to defend yourself. You don't have the right to take initiative killing non-Muslims, and if you're engaged in something like jihad or holy war. Mm-hmm. So it's an interpretation, a misinterpretation, really, of the Quran that leads some Arab Muslims in particular along the wrong path. And then you look, and again, we have to get involved in these discussions and set it straight. And an Arab can't just say, well, you don't read Arabic, you don't understand. Yes, I do, and I do understand what the Quran says. I understand what other people are telling me about you have a superior right. We can get into that as well. But then let's look on the Jewish side. How is it that, whether I know Christian Zionists in the United States don't necessarily agree this is true, but many Jews believe in the same thing about non-Jews by their interpretation of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, right, is the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Pentateuch, it says that the Jews are to get rid of the Hittites, the Canaanites, basically the non-Jews. You can actually, and it's supposed to go into Samaria and Judea. Samaria and Judea happens to be the West Bank. Most of Samaria is the West Bank. Go in and get rid of the non-Jews. And if you read that literally, that's sort of what it says.
Yeah.
And what happened was when we talk about this to many of the Orthodox Jews, they say, but Maimonides, a very famous Jewish scholar that everyone loves, especially the Jews love him, whether you're far right, far left. Maimonides said, well, there are very important mitzvahs for a Jewish person to follow Israeli law. You have to follow all 613 mitzvahs. It's just a lot of rules.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a hierarchy of mitzvahs. And he would say some of them are more important than others. For instance, treat your neighbor with respect is an important mitzvah. That Maimonides was here today, he'd be asking the question, are the Israelis treating their neighbors with respect? And that also is a Ten Commandment. So, but he also would say these orders by God, if you look at the Pentateuch, coming from the Torah, ordering the Jews to get rid of the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Canaanites, through which Arabs have heritage, the Palestinians seek heritage. But Maimonides said that these orders by God are not necessarily transferred from one generation to the other, but let's just say it is. But still, there are important Jewish laws like treat your neighbor with respect, again, which is the Ten Commandments, is not being respected today.
Mm-hmm.
So we get into these discussions about the Torah and how that's interpreted. And so many of the Jewish settlers, they look at the Torah and they say, look, what happened way in the past, we were ordered by God, reading the Torah literally, to go into Samaria and Judea and get rid of the non-Jews, and we disobeyed God. We even intermarried with non-Jews. You see, but we're atoning for that sin today. We're going back into Samaria and Judea. We're getting rid of the non-Jews, and we're killing them, actually, and we're justified in doing that because we're atoning for our sins. So this is another distorted translation of a religion, Judaism, such as this in the same light as many Muslims distort the Quran. So religion can do a lot to inflame and to distort people's priorities to the extent that it also can engender hate. So it's this ignorance, first of all, this orthodox type of approach, for instance, to Islam, where you believe it also says in the Quran that the Jews and the Christians used to be the chosen people, but they followed the wrong path.
Yeah.
The Jews and the Christians follow the wrong path. Yeah. So that makes us, the Muslims, now following the right path. And that justifies us to brush them all aside and move forward and convert them. And if they don't convert, then we can maybe even be justified in killing them. Yeah. So these are another, just a story. I'm just giving you religious examples that have, to answer your question, that have inflamed Arabs and Muslims against, Jews and have this sort of prejudice, and vice versa. Yeah. So it goes both ways. But lastly, Richard, very quickly, is what's very intriguing is about 15 years ago when I was going back and forth into Paris, and I wasn't banned from Paris to Israel and Palestine, and now I'm banned, I can't do it. I met a scholar in Tel Aviv. He was a biologist who's done a lot of serious studying about the genomes of Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs. And guess what he has found? that their genome, their genetic makeup is very, very similar. In other words, they have almost identical genes in their genetic makeup. But just because they're genetic brothers and sisters, let's say, doesn't mean they have to uh, be at peace with each other. Just because you happen to be a brother, what happened in the Civil War? We had brothers going after brothers, brothers killing fathers over the Civil War, even though they're the same family. So just because they have the same genes doesn't mean they have to get along and love each other. But it's kind of it's kind of ironic that these just have found very similar genetic structures in both Palestinian Arab blood as Israeli Jewish blood. But that's just a side. I think this hate that's been engendered so much is about, and to answer your question more directly, though, Richard, is really the brainwashing interpretation of the Quran, misinterpretation, or misinterpretation of the Torah. But let's just look at the hate for the Jews. Misinterpretation, and in its ignorant interpretation, ignorance engenders hate. And since they don't know each other, that's another thing. You're talking about someone you don't know anything about. The Jews and the Palestinians live in separate villages. They have little to do with each other often. And you know what happens if you don't know that person, you don't know who they are, you have ignorance about them. That ignorance engenders hate and distrust. And that's another problem, that they don't have a lot to do with each other. And we need to, hopefully we can do something about that. We can integrate things. Maybe we could call it an Israel for, instead of having two state, one state. But again, the Israelis say if we did that, we would be a minority and the Arabs would take over. But you see, if you look at South Africa as an analogy, when the South African blacks took over, they were far in the majority over the minority whites, but the minority whites were not annihilated. They even maintain a lot of power over the economic structure, the economic substructure of South Africa. So they're thinking about, if we make it a one state, that's going to happen. And once the Palestinian Arabs are in majority, we are going to be annihilated. And I think that is just a way to continue the hate and continue the fighting. So people are so afraid, keep them afraid that there's going to be a new Holocaust. It's another fear of that. And that engenders hate again. So this engendering of hate is a vicious cycle of hate and misunderstanding on both sides. It's what's erupting and making this peace a difficult thing to arrive at.
Well, I will add a couple things before we wrap up here. Number one, I have not read the Quran. I participated in the creation of the audible version, the dramatized version by David Williamson, who I mentioned earlier. And one of the things that I know is in the book, because I've asked him about this, it says in there that Muhammad, peace be unto him, says that the followers are to protect who? The people of the book. Now, that was in 1500. That was in the 1500s. So is that referring to the Christians? I mean, they had one. I don't know if Gutenberg had his printing press yet, but then you also had the Jews who had the Torah and so forth and the other books. So, first got to define which one that is. Then there's the other side of it in the Torah that you've referred to, those 613 laws. And of course, this has been going on for centuries, obviously, in most faiths. They cherry pick. And I've often challenged people, especially when it comes to the whole issue of same-sex relationships. A rabbi that I had on the program asked me this question. He says, do you know the context under which that law was created? I said, I have no clue. He says it was to help to not to interfere with the procreative process of man. Well, here we are in the 21st century. Do you really think that's happened? We have people who have same-sex relationships, right? On both sides. And yet we're at almost 8.5 billion people. And what I found interesting was that they like to cherry pick. They want to use that one to beat to death other people who are of same-sex relationships. However, they still let their wives and daughters stay at home for those 7 days that they're having their periods. And then the list goes on of all of the other laws that we have just said, well, we've justified it by saying, well, we have this technology and we have that and this and that. No. You can't pick and choose how you interpret it. It says, so it's really interesting to me in my observations. I'm trying to, I have a certain set of beliefs, as do you. I speak of them in the context of straw huts. Okay. And
Straw huts, what's that?
straw huts, meaning those beliefs,
Straw huts.
a
Okay.
straw hut, and I'm
Mhm.
willing to burn them all to the ground and start over again if that's what it takes in order to come to a greater understanding of who I am in the grand scheme of things, in this community, in the universe, to the creator, however, I choose to look at it. And to me, that is part of why we're here, is to understand those aspects, that ramification of our existence. I mean, because we've been asking the question, who am I? Why am I here? And where am I going? And those are several of the profound questions that man has been asking since man has been here. And our great philosophers have been trying to answer those questions, or at least put their perspective on it. And that's all we're trying to do here. Frank Romano, my guest, this is Tell Me Your Story. And Frank, thank you. Thank you for being a part of what we're trying to do to change the world. I know that for a lot of people, boy, that was pretty dark there at the front end of that program. Well, I understand that. But then again, following the darkness is the light. And that's what we're trying to put on it. And I think we did that fairly well in the second half of our program, or at least the second third, the final third of it in any event. And I thank you for what you're doing, for what you've been through. Final question in that regard is, how has everything that you have been through, how has that affected you or your soul, shall we say? That which is truly Frank, that actually doesn't have a name, but that animates the body that you happen to reside in, that which is immortal.
I've always, I think it's part of my own faith and my discipline to stay focused on who I am, what my passion is that I share with humanity, and not let negative factors, whether it be hate or judgmental things, affect me. And you can also say almost a part of me naive like a child, so I'm open and not prejudiced, and I still have that love, a feeling for all people and all cultures, and I keep faithful to that. But I've been also involved in healing, natural healing, and I realize that if I can be a conduit, like channeling cosmic energy and help people heal themselves, as I have been, and sometimes I've got to keep myself pure as much as possible toward my own passion. That is to say, who I am and and who I am. I've always had this empathy, and I think the empathy for struggling people came from, because personally, when I was younger, my father did abuse me and hit me a lot and beat me a lot, and I was helpless. And from that point on, I fought him, but I realized I have this empathy for all helpless people, and we're all helpless in a way, including myself.
Yeah.
But have empathy for all people, all races, and all situations. So a lot of this discrimination and violence comes from people trying to dominate others because of their own insecurities often. So I try to, if someone becomes very aggressive with me, I try to see who they are, listen to them, and try to understand who they are and not judge them, and try to understand them and love them for who they are. I think these principles, my strong faith, and keeping focused on the passion that I have, trying to make it a better world, and understanding different cultures and understanding people and loving people, I stay strictly on that path. And I think that's given me the strength to not corrupt my soul in a way, and keep myself pure. And a part of me still remains very naive and open, because if I'm simply putting up antennas every time I hear something, I'm not objective, I'm not loving, I'm just judging. I'm just full of preconceived ideas. I try to keep them out of me and stay open and stay loving, and that's sort of what's been guiding me, Richard.
How can people get more information? Where should they go? Have you got a website that you would recommend them go to, or if you have a website that we can send people to that we can connect with?
Yeah, one of them is Romano, Frank Romano, Love and Terror, even Love and Terror, the fifth edition. So Frank Romano, Love and Terror, fifth edition. That has a lot of stuff. It is, my activist work, my acting work, and my ideas and book events and photos and stuff like that. And if you just put in Frank Romano anyway, and Flotilla or Frank Romano in Palestine or Israel, there's a lot of stuff. And I do hope, at least through my publisher, that's a great way to contact me, because that's totally open. You can contact me if you don't want to go on the website, because there's a place where you can contact me and go through my publisher, which is AB Film Publishing out of New York, and talk to me directly. I'm really open to suggestions, and even if people don't agree with me, hopefully we can engage in a dialogue, and I can learn from people as well. So I keep that open. So hopefully people will contact me, and I hope we'll continue this, Richard, and we can continue this dialogue.
I hope so too. I think it's important. I mean, I'm just one guy out here in the middle, up here a mile high above San Bernardino, California, trying to do my part, running a radio station and doing these programs on a regular basis. Normally, they are of a more spiritual and metaphysical bent. And maybe what we can do is we can turn the tables a little bit and maybe do a program along those lines with what you were just talking about in terms of the healing and the metaphysical aspects of our lives here, to sort of shift and transform the energy to make that bigger difference. Because I'll tell you, if we can put out that vibe, all right, to the person next to us, who then takes it and put the person next to them, and it has that domino effect. So I hope that people will do that. I have three final questions that I would like to ask you. I ask all of my guests. But before I ask those of you, I'm going to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and then we are here Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are podcasting at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We are also on YouTube and Rumble. We hope that you will avail yourselves of that. Subscribe as well as click notification. And then we hope that you will go to Amazon and get a copy of my book, which is Choices, 5 Steps for Life. That's what we've been talking about through this entire program. And every program, it's all about choices. And 5 Steps for Life, I hope you get a copy. It's available in hardcover, paperback, as well as Kindle. We also hope that you can send us a little financial support. We have not only a PayPal account, but we also have Zella. So if you could send us something, the beautiful thing is, guess what? If you use either, just put in my email address, richard@richarddugan.com. And thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. And also, take some time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place. Many of the belief systems, many of the ancient wisdom teachings speak of this place where you can go and listen to, and I hope, follow the promptings of that still small voice. And with that, we go to the final 3 questions for a very special guest, all the way from Paris, France. As we are conversing here on the program right now, it's probably, I don't know, midnight or 1 or 2 a.m. I have no idea. Nonetheless, I appreciate Frank Romano for staying up with us. And the first of these 3 questions is, who is Frank Romano?
Who am I?
Yeah.
I'm just a soul-searching person, and I continue to do that. I try to work with people as I have as a lawyer, But bottom line is, I'm constantly soul searching, trying to find truth, and trying to manifest that in the way I act, not just in my words. Manifest truth and sincerity and love. And I think I saw these different avenues, whether it be a law professor, international lawyer, whether it be a California lawyer, or an actor. I'm constantly trying to manifest truth, understanding, and bringing forth empathy for people of the world. So that is me, really. Basically, I'm just seeking. I'm just a truth seeker, and I'm continuing to do that. Basically.
Hear, hear. Second question is, what gets you up in the morning?
Yeah. Knowing that pursuing the path of understanding and love, maybe I'll find a way to make a difference, even though there are challenges. Right now, when we were in the boat, I'm focusing a lot of press attention. That was great, but now that we're back on land, continue communicating with people through the press and just directly through people. I get up in the morning to think that maybe today I can learn more about how to be a better person, a better healer, a more empathetic person, and then maybe with my actions or words, I can affect others' thinking so they can follow their own passion and their only passion of faith and love as well.
And finally,
yeah.
What was your best day?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the best day, I always go back to it, is when I arrived in Paris way back in 1976. And I was doing a semester in Belgium, and I came to Paris for another semester to finish my senior year, and I was studying political science. I was asked to take on a role in a French classic play. I had been an actor before. My French is still not that great. So I'm coming from Belgium also that has a similar French, but not always the same terminology. And they asked me to take on this role in a play because the actor, they've been practicing this play. They've been for 4 months, and right before they're to perform it, it's a play like, it's called Apollon de Bellac by Jean Giraudoux. It's a classic French play in French. And the actor that was supposed to play they told me not an important part, had left, but it's important enough that if they don't find an actor, they're going to have to cancel everything. So I said, look, I've got 2 weeks before the semester starts. I'll be glad to do something. It's not a big role. They said, well, here's the play, and you need to study up. And then within 4 days, we will have we'll have training. What do you call it? And my brain is mushed when you're doing theater. Rehearsal. Thank you. Rehearsal. I'm thinking répétition in French, and I'm thinking my French is taking over my English. Rehearsal. And so I said, fine. So I took the book in the subway to get back to the place where I was staying. And I noticed that it's a major role. There are many pages of French, and it's not even my mother tongue that I'm going to have to memorize. But I started working. Here I am in France for the first time to start this semester, and I wanted to go see the Eiffel Tower. I wanted to see the Arc de Triomphe. I wanted to see the Latin Quarter and all these things on my list that I wasn't able to because I had to stay in this room on the outside of Paris memorizing these lines, knowing full well that when the play is over in 2 weeks, it's to be performed in 2 weeks, I'll be able to do all those things. Well, it turned out that in rehearsal, I still hadn't memorized everything. I had to read part of it, the play, but I got into it. It got into my blood. And but the last day, right before the performance, I realized we hadn't had one rehearsal where I was off book. I meant that I didn't have to read lines. I figured, how am I going to do this? He said, well, we'll have a proctor in a spectator who will prompt you, a prompter, and they'll prompt you if there's a problem. I said, yeah, okay, but I've got so many words, and I've got so many cues to memorize. How, am I going to make it through? And I went to one of the actresses who was in this part. I was actually a fiance to an important woman, and that was one of my roles, as we were supposed to get married and blah blah blah. And I went to her and I says, "What do you want? What do I do?" She said, "Look, the day of performance, go out, get yourself a nice lunch, and drink wine." So I took her advice. Said, "Well, otherwise you're going to have to close everything. If I don't come through, it's over. They're going to have to. And all the people that booked, there must have been over 100 people that had booked a place in this play, that had booked their seat. Well, they'll have to give it up, and they'll have to be reimbursed. It'll be a big problem in Paris over this." I said, "Okay." So the day comes of performance. I go out and have lunch and some an omelet, and I get a bottle of wine, kind of cheap red wine. I'm not even a wine drinker much. I drink wine, but not much. But 3/4 of the bottle I drank. So I show up, hiccuping, and I sit down. You know, when you're ready to go on stage and you're all seated and backstage, and a couple of people next to me looked at me and smelled the wine. I mean, "Oh my God, you're drunk, you disgusting." And I said, "Well, I don't know, whatever." But all of a sudden, when the curtains opened, curtain were drawn and the lights were on, it was like magic. It just flowed. It's just amazing. And I didn't need prompting, because when I was supposed to give her, I'm the fiance to this woman, I'm supposed to give her a ring. I forgot the word for ring, but the prompter said, who was close to the theater, bague, because bague is ring in French. But that's the only word I messed up on, but it was like magic. And at the end of that evening, I was able to leave, and they wanted me to go and do. They wanted to have a party after that, and stuff. And I went, "Well, I might catch you there later," but I just needed to leave the theater and experience Paris for once, because I wanted to have some fun a little bit. That night, we just went to a bar and had something to drink, and it was a special night, because I felt that I was able to play this role and get into it. And so the play is the thing, as Shakespeare said. It went through. It wasn't. It didn't. They didn't close the program. I was able to go through with it, and it was just a feeling of euphoria that something that was almost impossible happened, and yet with the good vibes and hard work and wine. So that's a long story of probably the most special night in my life.
Oh, it's beautiful. That is beautiful. Well, thank you again for sharing that and yourself here on the program with us. Frank Romano, my guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, video cast, love Talal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy, because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for being in my life and letting me be in yours. To my dear brother, Michael, welcome to fatherhood, my friend. And to my dear friend, Zorro, aho, aho.